Let's do this.
Once upon a time, there was a land that was happy and prosperous. It had a great education system, safe streets, and jobs for everyone.
Just to point out, the time period mentioned are the years immediately following World War II, namely the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
There were a few poor people and a few rich people. Most were in the middle. The people of this land paid for their good life by investing in their future together. They called this paying taxes. Everyone paid what they could afford. The poor people paid a little, the people in the middle paid a middling amount, and the rich people, 1% of everyone, paid more than the others. Just about everyone thought that this was best.
That is very dependent upon your view of a little and a lot. Paying 50% or more on the money you make over a certain amount is beyond ludicrous.
But over time, rich people decided they weren't rich enough.
The tax rate was 91%. Wouldn't you gripe if the government took over 90% of the money you were making?
So they came up with ways to get richer. The first way was through tax cuts. They didn't mind if this meant fewer services for everyone.
It's worth noting that during this period, government spending increased dramatically. Johnson's Great Society and the creation of programs like Medicaid, Medicare, and other welfare programs increased spending and were essentially a wealth transfer from the rich to the poor. And despite this, poverty rate has not decreased since the implementation of the programs. If anything, it actually halted the downward trend which existed prior to their creation.
They said, why should I care about other non-rich people? I can hire teachers, safety, waste disposal people to work for me for less money than taxes cost.
If it costs less than taxes, why would we give the money to the government first? Hell, for the people who do send their children to private schools, they actually pay twice since they still have to pay for public schools.
And then I can keep the rest of my taxes for me.
Oh, the horror. Someone wants to keep their own earnings. That's so selfish. It's selfish to want to keep your own money, but it's not selfish to want to take other people's money.
The second way rich people got richer was through tax loopholes. These are laws that allow people to avoid paying taxes, with the idea that it's beneficial for other people too.
Loopholes don't prevent people from paying taxes. It's an area in which people don't have to pay, such as not paying taxes on business expenditures.
If this group didn't pay. The third way rich people got richer was to pay no taxes at all. This is called tax evasion.
Oh, come on. Tax evasion is illegal. If they were caught and the government could prove it, they would be punished.
Of course, if all the people did this, everything would fall apart.
This is a gross assumption based on the idea that the things that the government does can only be accomplished by them.
But rich people and giant companies they owned figured no one would notice. This is illegal, but many did it anyway. And so it went.
Here they are discussing companies who make a profit overseas, such as Apple. These companies refuse to bring the profit back into the U.S. because the U.S. taxes it, despite the fact that it wasn't earned here. The U.S. is one of the very few countries who do this. Companies are in no way obligated to bring that money back in our shores, and it is not illegal.
In 20 years, rich people doubled their share of the land's income. Schools, public safety, the roads, parks, libraries, public transportation all went into decline. The rich people didn't care.
Spending on all these things has increased year over year, usually at a higher rate than the rate of inflation.
They said everyone gets what they deserve, and they bought their own teachers, police, garbage collectors, and transportation.
Wouldn't they still have to drive on the same shitty roads?
They also bought something else, elections. They spent so much money on politics, they elected people who liked what they liked.
Because no one else does this. That's right. I'm looking at you, Bernie Sanders supporters.
More tax cuts for the rich and big businesses, and fewer schools, road repairs, police, firefighters, and nurses for everyone else.
Again, spending has increased every year, and even with the tax cuts, income taxes have made up roughly the same percentage of GDP since the 1940s.
When the 99% became upset, the rich people and their politicians said, "There is no other way." They repeated this so often many people believed them.
What?
Meanwhile, instead of investing in things that most people could use, and instead of providing jobs that paid people well like they used to, rich people found they could make more money on Wall Street. Wall Street is a place where money makes money.
Money doesn't make money. People investing on Wall Street are investing into companies, which then go to create products and services, create jobs. That profit is then distributed among the shareholders.
Here, the 1% made money so fast that they devoted more and more money to it. They took some of that money and sent it far away, where workers had no rights, to produce things that workers used to produce here.
So right after World War II, the only manufacturing center in the world was the U.S., so every other country had to buy our products. However, after 30 years or so, other countries had built back up and competed for investments by having fewer regulations and offering fewer employment perks. The labor was cheaper, which allowed companies to sell a cheaper product.
When ordinary people wondered why rich people needed so much money, the 1% said, "Don't worry. This is good for you, too,
Quality of life in the U.S. has exploded in the last 30 years.
because it will trickle down from us to you."
Trickle-down economics has never existed, and no economist has ever claimed that it did.
Someday you'll be rich, and then the rules we made for us will be your rules, too. Some people weren't so sure about this, so the rich people bought newspapers and TV and radio stations and internet companies and paid them to repeat over and over, "Someday you will be rich, too. There is no alternative." Soon you could hear people saying, "There is no other way. Someday we'll be rich."
Oh, so the population is stupid and easily brainwashed. That explains the popularity of this video.
Meanwhile, the rich people's money piled higher and higher. But after a while, it was piled too high. One day, the money fell down with a big crash. It fell down right on the houses of millions of ordinary people. It broke their houses.
What a horrible description of the housing collapse. The rich having too much money wasn't even close to the cause. Were banks partly at fault? Absolutely. They gave out loans to people who would not be able to pay them back. Why did they do this? Because two government-run banks, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, went, "We will back up these loans if they go bad." Surprise, surprise, the government is mostly to blame. This was caused by the Community Reinvestment Act, along with complex web of other factors. But it was government law that caused the problem.
Then more money towers fell down. They fell on ordinary people's jobs.
Once the dominoes start, they will keep going.
This is terrible. Everyone was scared. How did this happen? The government said, "We have to fix this."
Of course they did.
They were so used to rich people being rich, they immediately started printing money and giving it to rich people.
They gave it to the banks, not to the rich. However, I agree this shouldn't have happened.
But they didn't give any to the ordinary people whose houses and jobs were broken by the crash. Those people said, "You give the rich people money to replace their money that got lost in the crash. Why aren't you giving us any to fix our houses
Because the government fails at fixing things.
and our jobs? They got broken in the crash, too." The government had no answer. Now the people got mad. Since they weren't sure who to be madder at, the government or rich people, they got mad at both. Rich people got worried. They thought, if the people get mad enough at us, they might take some of our money. This really upset the rich people, because they loved their money more than anything in the whole world. So they devised a plan. They called it, "Look over there!" Whenever people said, "How come you rich people are getting richer while all the rest of us are losing our houses, our jobs, and our schools?" the rich people pointed at someone else and said, "Look over there!" First they pointed at the people whose houses were broken and said, "Look over there!"
Again, people took out loans far beyond their means. Not everyone who lost their home fit into that category. But again, dominoes.
Poor people caused the crash. They built their houses in the wrong place. If they hadn't done that, the money wouldn't have fallen on them. But most people didn't believe them. So the rich people pointed at someone else this time, teachers. They said, "Look over there! Teachers have jobs and you don't."
It's not the fact that they have jobs. It's the fact that public employees, including teachers, tend to have absurdly generous compensation packages, which are bankrupting cities and diverting funds from other areas. One only needs to look at Chicago and Detroit to see the case studies of that issue.
No one can ever fire them, and lots of teachers are bad. The schools are failing. Teachers are the reason. Bad teachers. Bad teachers.
It isn't just teachers, but public schools have no competition. This creates no incentive to improve practices, which compared to other countries, such as Japan, are lackluster at best.
Most people didn't believe this. They remembered the problem was the crash, not bad teachers.
And yet, the rich get all the blame, despite the government's involvement.
The rich people realized it might be safer for them if someone else pointed their fingers. So they took some of their money, and even though it was just a little bit of their money, it was a lot of money since they had so much. They helped more people get elected. These politicians pointed their fingers at police, firefighters, librarians, and other public employees. They said, "Look over there! These people are greedy. They have jobs and you don't. You don't have retirement plans and they do.
I don't think anyone has ever claimed that the public employees alone caused the crash.
They caused the crash." Some people thought this might be true. They knew someone or something had caused the money to fall. Maybe it was the firefighters. But others remembered that firefighters helped them when their houses were on fire. They also remembered it was the 1% who built the money towers that crashed on their houses and jobs.
But it was the government that caused the crash.
Some people even remembered those towers of money had replaced factories and jobs that people used to have. And those jobs used to have retirement plans, too.
Again, competition moved the jobs overseas. The whole point of a business is to minimize costs and maximize profit.
And the ordinary people remembered that the teachers and firefighters lived in their neighborhoods and shopped in the same stores and didn't seem to be the problem at all. The people looked around. They saw too many students in their classrooms.
The U.S. spends 4 times the OECD average per student and twice as much as Japan, with worse results.
They saw their roads filling with holes.
Most of the funding for roads is from taxes on gasoline. Oddly enough, the government gets more money per gallon of gasoline sold than the company does.
They saw when they needed help, it took longer to arrive. People began to say, maybe rich people have too much money now. And maybe our problems have something to do with the 1% not paying their fair share of tax.
In 2010, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the 1% paid 24% of income taxes. You heard right. The 1% is paying 20% of your taxes. 1% of the population is paying 20%. That's a great deal amount of money for such a small amount of people. The 20% paid 68% of all taxes. That's right, the top 20% richest people in the world pay 70% of your taxes. That small amount of people pay 70%. And the bottom 40% only paid 4.2% of income taxes. Those rich people aren't paying any taxes at all, am I right, guys?
And also, maybe rich people should pay the same rate of taxes they used to when our land was prosperous and more people were better off. The rich people heard these things and grew worried. They told their politicians to pass laws to prevent people from organizing, prevent people from voting, prevent people from having retirement plans.
What? What laws were suggested or passed that would have prevented any of those things?
But now the people understood the problem. It was rich people who crashed the money onto their houses and jobs. It was the 1% who got politicians to cut their taxes.
Taxes and the government spending tax money and trying to solve the problem is actually what caused the problem to begin with. It wasn't rich people, it was government.
There wasn't enough for schools, safe streets, libraries, healthcare, and parks. And it was rich people blaming everyone but themselves for what had happened.
The funny thing is, the rich people were actually pointing their fingers at the actual problem. I can't stress enough how it was big regulation and big government that caused the crash to begin with.
And we have a question. Is there no alternative? Or can the people of this land do something to live happily ever after?
This video, which claims the rich are trying to scapegoat others, was clearly created to scapegoat the rich. Hypocrites much? If you like this video, please smash that freaking like button and also smash that subscribe button too. And I'll catch you on the next episode.